Heather.
Hello.
Hi, Johnny. So there are all of my audience members.
Hi, Johnny.
All right, and kind of up to you whether you want to do the whole self of me or just the top of me, whatever. I love Ambrose. Ambrose gets to count too. All right, so let's go. So I've been dancing since I was very, very little. I started teaching when I was 16, and it was when I was about in my mid-20s and I was an adjunct instructor at the University of South Dakota that I really started gazing into different styles of tap dance and the origin of tap dance and thinking about where this actually came from because no one had ever told me before. I know that I have a couple of sort of dancers in the crowd and some folks who have no interest in it whatsoever, but this is really the story of American history and of American art form. So hopefully we can all walk away with a little bit more appreciation of it. I'm going to talk about three main things. I'm going to talk about the African roots, the Irish roots of tap dance, and how they there was a clash of culture that brought them together here in the Americas. Before I go any further, though, I want to tell you what my sources are. Most of my information comes from this book, Tap Roots by Mark Knowles. Really, really fascinating. Not well written, but that's all right. Tap by Rusty Frank is much better written, and a really fascinating look at some of the tap after what's in this speech. All right, so starts out with African roots. Of course, there was the Atlantic slave trade from the 16th to the 19th century in which 12 million plus people were brought to the Americas to be slaves. They came from a hugely diverse range of communities. So to talk about African dance is one thing is not true, but I'm going to talk about some stylistic generalities. One stylistic generality is that they had very layered syncopated rhythms that they expressed with their bodies. And then another really important generality is that they generally had a really loose body with loose knees. And you didn't want to look like a corpse when you were doing African dance. I would say, don't look like a corpse. You wanted to be lively and animated. Okay, so the Africans were forced to bring their dance style over. The Irish came of their own volition, but under difficult circumstances as well. There was the great potato famine in the 1840s, and about 1 million people died in Ireland, and about 1 million people immigrated. And most of them did not have money to make the passage themselves, and so they came as indentured servants, which was also a pretty difficult life. And we'll come back to that in a minute. But two things about Irish dance that have carried over into tap dancing is they had incredibly tight, controlled footwork, very fancy. A great compliment would be that you could dance on a plate. And then another important part of Irish dance was that they were the first people to put metal on the bottoms of their shoes. It was tacks, it was nails, it was coins, something to really accentuate those rhythms. All right, so we have this really loose form of dance and this really tight form of dance. And how they came together is not a very happy story. I'm going to take this clash of cultures that was happening all over our country, and it's kind of a repeating story of American history, and I'm going to narrow it down to about the mid-1800s to the early 1900s. I'm going to narrow it down again and talk specifically about what was happening in New York City, because New York City was a hotbed of culture then, just as it is now. So slavery was abolished in New York State in about 1827, so there was a large population of free Africans, but they were dealing with poverty and discrimination and segregation. And when we had this huge influx of Irish immigrants, they also dealt with the same things. Because they were Catholic, they were not considered to be white. And so they had to live in the same ghettos as African Americans. They were competing for the same jobs. They dealt with the same segregation. And so they were living in the same space and socializing in the same places, the same juke joints, the same marketplaces. And it was not a happy cohabitation because the Irish were, in general, extremely racist. And so one of the ways that they expressed this competition was through dance challenges. And whether it was in the marketplace or a juke joint, they'd throw it on a wooden door, they'd throw it on a plank, and they'd challenge each other. And so an Irish dancer would get up and challenge an African dancer, and he'd lay down a rhythm, and then this guy would have to copy that and better it, and this guy would copy that and better it. And back and forth it went. And that was the first place the two dances really hybridized and became something new and different. And it was taken to the stage in the minstrel shows. So pre-Civil War, many of the Irish dancers, in order to make a living, they put on minstrel shows together, and they would blacken their faces with cork and do these really degrading caricatures of African dancers. But within that, they would take this dance from the street and put it on the stage, and that's where it became popularized and traveled all over the country and became known as tap dancing. Post-Civil War, African dancers did the same and continued to perpetrate the same stereotypes because they needed the work, they needed the jobs. If you want to learn more about that, Bamboozled by Spike Lee is a great, great movie. I highly recommend it. All right, so we started with African roots, then we went to Irish, and then how they came together. I think that this story is not well known in general, and not even among tap dancers, because it has its roots in racism. It's impossible to talk about, but I think it's really important to talk about because it's an American story of how something ugly became something very beautiful and something we can celebrate together now. I want to end with a quote by Mr. Bunny Briggs, who was a protege of the great John Bubbles. This was caught on film in the documentary by George Nuremberg called No Maps on My Taps. And what Mr. Briggs said, they were talking about why tap has evolved and endured through all the ages. And what Mr. Briggs said was that you are free when you're in the rhythm. And there is that general feeling that when you're dancing, you're above and beyond it all. And that's it. Ta-da.